I'm joined now by Congressman Daniel Goldman. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me again, Brian.
So within the last few days, there has been this issue that's bubbling up to the surface, and that is this threat by Donald Trump that he will seek to serve a third term. First of all, because I know that this is going to be, I want to get into the legality of this in just a moment, but there's a lot of talk back and forth about whether him even bringing this up is just to serve as a distraction from the even worse things that are happening in his administration right now, from the stock market tanking to the trade wars to his threats to annex Greenland to his firing of veterans. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I just wanted to get your take first and foremost on this idea that this isn't deserving of our attention right now because this is little more than a distraction. And I think we've even had Republican senators trying to carry water for him by saying exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, Republican senators and other Republicans continue to say that he's just joking around. He very specifically said this weekend to Kristen Welker, that I'm not joking.
Right.
So, it's convenient to avoid the question because the Constitution is very clear, which is why I introduced a resolution just to reaffirm the plain language of the Constitution. Look, I think it's a little of both. I think that it is designed to be a distraction, but it is also consistent with how Donald Trump operates and consistent with his very methodical, ongoing effort to completely undermine our democracy and take total control over our government. And so we cannot let this consume us entirely, but it is very important to see it as part of a larger piece of what's going on, which started day one with his pardoning of the violent insurrectionists, January 6th folks, and has continued with firing inspectors general, with firing DOJ prosecutors, with firing law enforcement agents. Now he's completely usurped all power from the congressional Republicans who refuse to stand up to him. And they are just allowing Elon Musk to chop away at our federal government, including absolutely essential programs that Americans depend on. Even in their budget resolution, they are going after Medicaid. You mentioned the tariffs, skyrocketing prices, stock market tanking, businesses stopping to spend because they don't know what's going on, which will really hurt increase unemployment rate in the next couple of months. It's been a disaster for the average American person. And so, yes, by him talking about a potential third term, it distracts us from all of the damaging and devastating actions he's taken, including the layoffs of 10,000 HHS workers that began today.
I have to ask, when you introduced your resolution to reaffirm support for the 22nd Amendment, which in a normal world should not be necessary, that members of Congress should reaffirm their support for the very document that they swear an oath to uphold, but what did Mike Johnson do?
Nothing.
Did
I don't know. It's still Republican.
Did he allow it to go up for a vote?
He did not address it. He did not call it up for a vote. He did not send it to a committee. No Republican has co-sponsored it. And look, it should be so simple. It really should not be complicated. And I think the fact that no Republican is willing to go on record to say that the Constitution prohibits Donald Trump or anyone from serving a third term shows how much in the pocket of Donald Trump the Republicans are. And what he is now trying to do is he's already gotten all the power of Congress, and he has completely submitted them, to use a wrestling term. And now he's going after the judiciary because that's the last check and balance on him. So he is attacking the judges. He is threatening to impeach them. And of course, there are members of Congress who will, jump when he says jump, who are introducing impeachment resolutions. We just had a hearing today on a bill that's designed to take away the power of district court judges to temporarily pause cases until the actual substance can be resolved. They're doing everything they possibly can to undermine the courts, to take away power from the courts so that Donald Trump can do whatever he wants.
Now, we already know that if things were to go in the normal course of business, that there would be no way that any changes to the Constitution would take place. You need 2/3 of the House and the Senate, 3/4 of the states to ratify some amendment to the Constitution. So that's the only way to undermine the 22nd Amendment. He's alluded to this fact that, and so has Steve Bannon, this idea that there are other avenues to be able to do this. Can you speak on that? Are there any avenues that the Trump administration or his band of mouthpieces and sycophants are looking at as a way to kind of go around the Constitution to be able to really remain in office?
Yeah. Well, I found it interesting that even Representative Andy Ogles from Tennessee introduced a sycophantish resolution supporting Donald Trump for a third time. But interestingly, what he introduced was a constitutional amendment, meaning even he admits that in order for Donald Trump to serve a third term, the Constitution needs to be changed. I guess Bannon and others are floating different ideas. Every legal expert that I've seen has said that there's no there's no way to get around this. But I do think that we should not be focused on the legal technicalities, because what I really take it as is pushing the envelope of his ability to essentially cancel our elections. Now, he may do it in a Vladimir Putin type of way by, say, holding quote unquote elections, but that they're not real. But this is pushing the window to get people normalized and socialized to Donald Trump continuing to be president, not in any kind of legal way, but over the course of the next 4 years, for him to undermine the very foundation of our democracy to such a point that he can come up with a plausible explanation for why he should be the nominee and there should be a fake election. He just issued an executive order last week that severely usurps the power from the states to oversee elections. All of this is geared towards his efforts to effectively become a dictator. And I think we have to call it out as we see it, Brian. And people are reluctant to go that far. They're concerned that, well, maybe there's a legitimate explanation for this, or it's waste, fraud, and abuse, or whatever it is, or, it's retribution for the lawfare from Democrats. Bullshit. It is his methodical effort outlined extensively in Project 2025 to undermine our democracy and to usurp all power. And I think it's less about whether or not the Constitution allows him to do it and much more about normalizing the idea so that as he moves forward, that is an increasingly a possibility.
Right. And I think that's such an important point that just relying on the Constitution is not self-executing, and it requires people who are actually willing to uphold it, and that includes judges all the way up to the Supreme Court. And we've seen that the Supreme Court has been willing to create provisions that will help Donald Trump out of whole cloth, like this idea of presidential immunity. We've seen that the Supreme Court is, by that same metric, willing to ignore provisions that would hurt Donald Trump, like Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which would have prohibited him from running for office again because he engaged in or gave aid or comfort to those who engaged in insurrection. And so this idea that we don't have to worry about this, we don't have to talk about this, it's just a distraction, nothing like this is actually going to come to bear because the Constitution prevents it. Well, the Constitution requires people actually upholding the Constitution for it to work. And we have seen pieces of our democracy break down in deference to Trump. And so that's why I think it is important to talk about this right now. And yes, it may very well be a distraction, but the antidote to that then is to also talk about the things that it's a distraction from. And so we can talk about the fact that he has dictatorial tendencies, that this guy wants to be an autocrat, that he's already moving to kneecap elections in the future. And we should and can also talk about the fact that he is crashing the economy, that the stock market is at a record low, that he's firing tens of thousands of federal employees, hardworking people who, by the way, would command a lot more money if they worked in the private sector, that he's stripping Medicaid and food stamps and kneecapping Social Security Administration's ability to be able to function. And so we have to have like an all of the above approach. But I do think it's important here not to just ignore what's happening right in front of us because, it may be a distraction, when the reality is that we're going to come to a point where this is going to come to bear, and we will have wished we spoke about it sooner, so that as opposed to just burying our heads in the sand because we thought we could only talk about one thing.
I totally agree with you. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And
yeah.
I have been out publicly pointing out when I thought some of the things that he was saying were pure distractions. I thought, the whole Greenland thing, at least initially, I was like, let's not pay attention to that. If he actually is going to start moving forward and doing something about it, we'll pay attention. But we're not going to go on his wild goose chase. Removing 1.8 million Gazans, Palestinians from Gaza, and building Trump Gaza there. It wasn't. It's incredibly. It's absurd on many levels, but it's not worth our time to talk about it. This is different, and part of it is it's different because of what's going on in Congress right now, which is an effort to severely limit judicial district court judges, the first level judges, ability to temporarily pause cases. Now, the rationale that many Republicans are using is that Donald Trump won the election, and he said that he was going to do, they apply whatever he said, whatever the issue is, he said everything, that he's going to do everything.
Yeah.
And therefore, because he was elected and because he said he was going to do it, he gets to decide what the law is, and he gets to decide what the Constitution is. And this is literally their rationale for trying to strip away power from the district court judges. Well, if you take that just a little bit further, and you believe that the executive, the president, under this unitary executive theory, gets to be judge and jury and gets to determine what the law is and what the Constitution says, well, then there's no need for courts.
Right.
And Donald Trump just gets to determine and declare what he can and cannot do. That, of course, is not how our system works. But we're only in April of his first of 4 years. And to make that argument, which, of course, applies to every president, that they were elected on a mandate of some sort, is laying the groundwork to, I think, essentially usurp the power of the judiciary and to be able to ignore court orders because Donald Trump was elected. That's literally what the argument is. And that is what I think this argument fits into, which is a very purposeful effort to undermine all authority of the judiciary and take it all for the president.
Now, in the Republicans' efforts to be able to do that, to be able to prevent courts from issuing nationwide injunctions against the worst excesses of this administration, what do they need to do? Is this just regular order? Is this just passing a law where it means a simple majority in the House and then exceed the filibuster in the Senate? Or is there some certain rule where it doesn't go by the normal course of order?
Well, they had a bill that was supposed to be on the floor this week. They just failed to pass a rule, so they can't bring it to the floor this week. But it would severely narrow district court judges, the court of first impression, from issuing nationwide injunctions. And all that does is it means that in a particular circumstances where the interpretation of a law is at issue, the interpretation of the Constitution is at issue, where the legal issue applies equally to everyone in the country, rather than just to temporarily pause. And that's all we're doing. That's all these judges are doing. They're just saying, let's keep the status quo so that we can let the legal process play out. And ultimately, the courts will rule on the actual substance of it. And if it goes to the Supreme Court, it goes to the Supreme Court, and they will have the final say. But in the meantime, let's just keep the status quo. They don't want that to happen. And they say that the only way that that anybody who's aggrieved by these laws or the Constitution, constitutional interpretation, can get relief is if they each independently file a lawsuit. So if you have people who have citizenship here because of birthright citizenship, it is not good enough for one to file a lawsuit. That can only pertain to that individual person. What this bill requires is that every single person who has citizenship through being born here in the United States, not through their parents, that they all must file a lawsuit. Now, can you imagine what that would do to our courts? It's stupid and absurd, but it is an effort, again, to intimidate, to undermine the judiciary, to try to flex muscle against judges who, by the way, they're also threatening. Right. So it's all of this intimidation effort that makes no sense from any kind of practical legal analysis, but is really designed to oppose the merits of the court's order and to assert that Donald Trump is the one who gets to interpret the law, not the courts, which from 1803, Marbury versus Madison, you don't have to be a lawyer to know that case, very clearly established that the judiciary branch is the branch of government that determines what the law is and what the Constitution is. And the judiciary branch can only rule on a case that comes before it. You can't reach out and file a case to be able to rule on it.
Right.
So there has to be an issue of dispute that goes before a court that a court resolves. So it's both impractical and kind of ineffective, but that's not the point. The point is intimidation.
Right. And of course, if we're lucky enough to be in a world where we have a Democratic president who succeeds this one, we'll see if any of these Republicans subscribe to this unitary executive theory like they're doing right now. Something tells me that they're going to have a change of heart.
Well, I'll just add, there's a particular judge in Texas who is the only judge in his area of his district. And the Republicans consistently file lawsuits seeking nationwide injunctions in his court because they know they will get him.
Right.
Matthew Kuzmarek.
Yep.
He is the one who issued a nationwide injunction on the FDA's approval of mifepristone. He has issued numerous nationwide injunctions when the Republicans go to him. So I didn't hear any complaints during the Biden administration when there was a ruling from him on also the censorship issue, and this bogus, government censorship case that, by the way, Chairman Jim Jordan and Subcommittee Chairman Darrell Issa, who's the author of this bill, both lauded and praised the nationwide injunction in the case related to so-called government censorship. So the hypocrisy, as usual, is the rule, not the exception.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Congressman, thank you for speaking out against this so forcefully. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.